Hey guys, tonight we are talking about the Mysterious Etruscans of Italy. Part 1: Origins and Environment. When you walk through the rolling hills of Tuscany or the coastal plains of Lazio, it's easy to imagine that beneath the soil lies the memory of an ancient people who once ruled these lands long before Rome rose to power. The Etruscans, a civilization both mysterious and influential, thrived in central Italy for centuries before they were absorbed into the Roman Republic around the late 4th century BCE. Despite their importance as a cultural bridge between the early Italic peoples and the emerging Roman state, we still know surprisingly little about the Etruscans. Their language remains only partially understood, their religious beliefs are shrouded in myth, and their origins are still debated by historians and archaeologists. To understand the Etruscans, we must begin with their land, Etruria, an area corresponding largely to modern Tuscany, western Umbria, and northern Lazio. This region was blessed with fertile soil, rich mineral resources, and access to both the Tyrrhenian Sea and inland trade routes. It was here, between rugged hills and coastal harbors, that a unique culture flourished from around 900 BCE, reaching its peak between the 7th and 5th centuries BCE. Etruria, land of riches, the Etruscans' homeland, was a patchwork of fertile plains, volcanic hills, and dense forests. Volcanic activity had enriched the soil, making it ideal for agriculture. Wheat, barley, olives, and grapes thrived in these conditions, providing the basis for a prosperous agrarian economy. Even more important than the soil were the metal-rich hills of Etruria. The region was famous for its iron and copper deposits, particularly around Populonia and Volterra. These resources allowed the Etruscans to become skilled metalworkers and traders. Bronze artifacts, helmets, mirrors, and decorative objects were highly valued and exported throughout the Mediterranean. The abundance of natural wealth gave rise to a powerful aristocratic class who could finance elaborate tombs and commission intricate works of art. Etruria was also strategically located. To the west lay the Tyrrhenian Sea, a gateway to maritime trade with the Greeks, Phoenicians, and Carthaginians. Inland, the Apennine Mountains formed a natural barrier, but also provided access to trade routes connecting northern Italy and the Po Valley with the south. The Etruscans occupied a crossroads of cultures, which allowed them to absorb influences from Greece and the Near East while maintaining a distinctive identity. Theories of origin. One of the most enduring mysteries of the Etruscans is their origin. Unlike the Greeks or Romans, the Etruscans left no grand historical texts to explain their beginnings. What we know comes from archaeology, linguistic studies, and the accounts of Greek and Roman historians. 1. Indigenous origin theory. The most widely supported theory among modern archaeologists is that the Etruscans were indigenous to central Italy. According to this view, they emerged from the local Villanovan culture, which is considered the direct predecessor of Etruscan civilization. Villanovan sites show early signs of the burial practices, metalworking skills, and social structures that later became hallmarks of the Etruscans. 2. Eastern origin theory. In contrast, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus believed the Etruscans came from Lydia. He wrote that a famine drove the Lydian people to migrate westward across the Mediterranean, eventually settling in Italy and becoming the Etruscans. Supporters of this theory point to similarities in religious symbols, decorative motifs, and certain linguistic elements between the Etruscans and peoples of the Near East. 3. Northern origin theory. Another classical writer, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, rejected Herodotus' claim and suggested that the Etruscans had northern Alpine origins. This theory has less support today, but reflects the ancient belief that the Etruscans were outsiders due to their unusual customs and language. Modern genetic studies have complicated the debate. While some DNA evidence suggests links to the Near East, Other studies indicate continuity with earlier Italic populations, supporting the indigenous theory. It is likely that the Etruscans were a blend of local Italic peoples with cultural influences from trade and migration. The Villanovan culture, Etruscan foundations. The Villanovan culture provides our first glimpse into the ancestors of the Etruscans. Flourishing between 900 and 700 BCE, the Villanovans practiced cremation, burying the ashes of the dead in urns often shaped like small huts. These hut urns, resembling the houses of the living, offer clues about early Italic architecture and domestic life. Archaeological finds from Villanovan sites such as Tarquinia and Veii reveal a society already skilled in metalworking and pottery. Villanovan artisans created distinctive black pottery known as bucero, which would later become an iconic Etruscan craft. By around 700 BCE, the Villanovan culture had evolved into the Etruscan civilization. This transition is marked by increased trade with the Greeks, the introduction of writing, and the rise of urban centers. Urbanization in city-states, unlike the later centralized Roman Republic, the Etruscans organized themselves into a loose confederation of independent city-states, each ruled by its own king or council of nobles. Major cities included Tarquinia, Veii, Cerveteri, Valki, Populonia, Arezzo, and Perugia. These cities were often built on hilltops for defensive purposes, with walls made of tufa stone and gates decorated with elaborate carvings. Each city was politically autonomous but connected by shared language, religion, and culture. According to later Roman sources, the Etruscans formed a league of 12 cities, which met annually at the sanctuary of Voltona to discuss religious and political matters. The urban centers of Etruria were bustling hubs of trade, craftsmanship, and ritual. Markets sold goods ranging from Greek pottery to locally produced bronze weapons. Temples crowned the hilltops, their wooden and terracotta structures adorned with colorful statues of gods and heroes. Influences from the Mediterranean. The Etruscans did not develop in isolation. By the 8th century BCE, Greek colonists had settled in southern Italy and Sicily, bringing with them their artistic styles, religious myths, and writing systems. Phoenician traders from the eastern Mediterranean also visited Etruria, exchanging luxury goods such as ivory, glass, and exotic spices for metal ores and crafted items. The Etruscans eagerly adopted and adapted these foreign influences. Their art shows clear Greek inspiration, especially in painted ceramics and sculpture. Their alphabet was derived from a Greek variant, which they used to record short inscriptions. However, the Etruscans were not mere imitators. They transformed these borrowed elements into a distinctly Etruscan style, often blending Greek mythology with local traditions. Religion and the early worldview. Religion was a cornerstone of Etruscan identity, even in its early stages. The Etruscans believed in a universe governed by divine will, and they sought to understand the gods' intentions through divination. Practices such as haruspicy and augury became central to Etruscan spiritual life. The early Etruscans also developed a complex pantheon of deities, some of which were later absorbed by the Romans. Tinia, Uni, and Minerva were among their principal gods, bearing similarities to Zeus, Hera, and Athena. The rise of aristocratic power. By 700 BCE, Etruscan society had become increasingly stratified. Wealthy aristocrats controlled the land, trade, and political offices, while artisans, farmers, and slaves formed the lower classes. The elites expressed their power through lavish tombs, which were often designed as houses for the dead, complete with furniture, frescoes, and everyday objects meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. These tombs, preserved in necropolises like those at Tarquinia and Cerveteri, have become a vital source of knowledge about Etruscan life. The wall paintings depict banquets, athletic games, musical performances, and scenes of daily activity, providing a vivid window into their culture. The Etruscans arose in a land rich with natural resources and strategically positioned for cultural exchange. From their Villanovan roots to their early city-states, they forged a civilization that blended indigenous Italic traditions with influences from across the Mediterranean. Their mastery of metalworking, trade, and urban organization set the stage for their dominance in central Italy during the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. Part 2. Culture and Society. The Etruscans were not merely skilled traders and warriors. They were a people defined by their sophisticated culture, complex social structure, and deep appreciation for art and ritual. In this section, we explore how the Etruscans lived, how their society functioned, and how their cultural practices set them apart from other ancient civilizations. Daily life in Etruria. Life in an Etruscan city-state was vibrant and varied. The streets of Tarquinia or Veii would have bustled with artisans shaping bronze mirrors, merchants selling imported Greek amphorae, and farmers bringing their produce to market. Houses and architecture. Etruscan homes varied depending on social class. The common people lived in simple huts or one-room houses made of mud brick and wood, often with thatched roofs. Wealthy families, however, built spacious dwellings with multiple rooms arranged around a central courtyard. These homes were decorated with painted terracotta tiles and contained wooden furniture, woven textiles, and bronze household items. The Etruscans were pioneers in architectural techniques. They mastered the use of the arch, a structural innovation that would later be perfected by the Romans. Their tombs, carved into hillsides or constructed as mound-like chambers, often mimicked the layout of a house, emphasizing the belief that the afterlife was a continuation of earthly life. Food and cuisine, Etruscan meals, reflected both their agricultural abundance and their connections to the wider Mediterranean world. Bread, porridge, and beans were staple foods for the lower classes, while the wealthy enjoyed meats such as pork, venison, and wild boar. Fish and shellfish were common along the Tyrrhenian coast, and olive oil and wine were essential parts of the diet. The Etruscans were known for their wine culture, with evidence suggesting they were among the first Italians to cultivate vineyards on a large scale. Wine was often flavored with herbs, honey, or spices. Banquets were social and religious events, featuring elaborate courses, live music, and dancing. Social hierarchy and class structure. Etruscan society was highly stratified, with clear divisions between classes. The aristocracy, at the top were the noble families who owned large estates, controlled trade, and held political power. They were buried in monumental tombs filled with treasures, signifying their wealth and status. Merchants and artisans. Below the aristocrats were skilled craftsmen, metal workers, and merchants. Etruscan artisans were highly regarded for their bronze work, jewelry, and intricate goldsmithing. Free farmers and commoners. These were the backbone of Etruscan society, working the fields, serving in the military, and contributing to the economy through agriculture and local trade. Slaves. Slavery was an established institution, with slaves used in domestic service, construction, and farming. Most were war captives or foreigners purchased through trade. The role of women. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Etruscan society was the status of women. Unlike in Greece or early Rome, Etruscan women enjoyed a level of freedom and visibility rare in the ancient world. Social participation. Women attended banquets alongside men, a practice considered scandalous by Greek observers. They reclined on couches, drank wine, and participated in conversations, much like their male counterparts. Etruscan frescoes frequently depict women enjoying music, dance, and athletic competitions. Naming conventions and inheritance. Etruscan women retained their own names after marriage, and inscriptions often list both the mother's and father's lineage. This suggests a recognition of maternal ancestry unusual for the time. Some evidence indicates that women could inherit property and manage estates, especially in the absence of male heirs. Influence on Rome. The independence of Etruscan women left a lasting impression on early Roman society, particularly during the period when Rome was under Etruscan kings. However, as Rome developed, it adopted the more restrictive Greek ideals of female modesty, pushing Etruscan practices to the margins. Art and aesthetic values. Etruscan art is one of the most vivid windows into their lives, beliefs, and values. Their artisans produced a range of works, from delicate gold jewelry to monumental sculptures. Sculpture and terracotta work. The Etruscans excelled in terracotta, creating lifelike statues of gods, heroes, and ordinary people. One of the most famous examples is the sarcophagus of the spouses, depicting a husband and wife reclining together with serene expressions. Painting and frescoes. The Etruscans adorned their tombs with vibrant frescoes, illustrating scenes of banquets, music, dancing, and hunting. These paintings reveal not only their love of life, but also their belief that the afterlife mirrored earthly pleasures. The Tomb of the Leopards at Tarquinia is a striking example, featuring musicians and diners enjoying a festive feast. Pottery and Baccaro ware. Etruscan pottery, particularly Baccaro, is instantly recognizable by its black, burnished surface and elegant shapes. While functional, these vessels often carried symbolic designs, including geometric motifs, animals, and mythological scenes. Influences and innovation. Although they borrowed motifs from Greek art, the Etruscans infused their work with a distinct character, more naturalistic, intimate, and emotional. Where Greek sculpture often emphasized idealized forms, Etruscan art favored dynamic poses and expressive faces. Language and writing. The Etruscan language remains one of the great puzzles of ancient history. While we have thousands of inscriptions, mostly on tombs, mirrors, and pottery, the language is only partially understood. Alphabet and scripts. The Etruscans adapted a version of the Greek alphabet around the 7th century BCE, which they used to record short texts. From this alphabet, the Romans developed their own script, which eventually became the foundation of modern Western alphabets. Literature. Ancient sources tell us that the Etruscans wrote books, particularly on religious and historical topics, but none have survived. Roman authors such as Livy and Varro referenced Etruscan texts on divination and rituals, suggesting that Etruscan literature was both extensive and influential. Music, dance, and festivals. The Etruscans were a celebratory people, with music and dance playing central roles in both religious and social events. Instruments. Archaeological finds and frescoes show lyres, double pipes, cymbals, and drums being played at feasts and rituals. Music was believed to have divine origins and was essential in ceremonies meant to appease the gods. Dance and theater. Etruscan dancers appear in tomb paintings, often performing acrobatic movements. Some scholars believe the Romans inherited aspects of their early theater from Etruscan religious performances, which combined music, dance, and storytelling. Clothing and fashion. Etruscan fashion was colorful and expressive, reflecting social status and cultural connections. Men's clothing. Men typically wore a tunic made of wool or linen, often with a decorative border. A heavy woolen cloak known as a tibana, an ancestor of the Roman toga, was draped over the shoulders. Women's clothing. Women wore long dresses or tunics, often layered with shawls or mantles. Jewelry, especially gold necklaces, earrings, and brooches, was a mark of wealth and refinement. Hairstyles and cosmetics. Both men and women styled their hair elaborately with braids, curls, or ornamental pins. Women also used cosmetics, including rouge and scented oils. Values and worldview. Etruscan society valued communal feasting, family lineage, and respect for the gods. Their worldview was deeply spiritual, with life and death seen as interconnected states. Unlike the Greeks, who often viewed death as a grim fate, the Etruscans celebrated the continuation of existence in another world, reflected in the joyful imagery of their tombs. The Etruscans were a people of contrasts, warlike yet artistic, religious yet pleasure-loving, traditional yet open to foreign influence. Their culture, especially the elevated status of women and the expressive nature of their art, sets them apart from other ancient Mediterranean civilizations. Part 3. Art, Writing, and Religion. To truly understand the Etruscans, one must look beyond their daily lives and social structures to the realms of creativity and spirituality. The Etruscans were masters of artistic expression, producing vivid paintings, striking sculptures, and intricate jewelry that reflected their worldview. At the heart of their civilization lay a profound and often mysterious religious tradition, one that shaped not only their art and architecture, but also influenced the religious practices of Rome for centuries. Art as a window into Etruscan life. Art was more than decoration for the Etruscans. It was a medium of storytelling, religious devotion, and cultural identity. Through surviving artifacts and tomb frescoes, we glimpse a society that celebrated both the pleasures of life and the inevitability of death. Tomb frescoes, life in color. The most famous examples of Etruscan painting come from the necropolises of Tarquinia, where dozens of tombs feature brightly colored murals. These paintings depict lively scenes of feasting, dancing, athletic contests, and banquets, suggesting that the Etruscans viewed the afterlife as a joyful continuation of earthly pleasures. Tomb of the Leopards. This tomb shows men and women reclining at a banquet, attended by musicians and servants, with 2 leopards painted on the upper wall. Tomb of the Triclinium. Scenes of dancers and flute players convey a sense of movement and festivity, symbolizing the eternal celebration of life. These frescoes reveal the Etruscans' love of color reds, blues, greens, and yellows dominate, and their skill in depicting dynamic human figures. Sculpture and terracotta mastery. Etruscan sculpture ranged from small bronze figurines to life-size terracotta statues. Their sculptors often created lifelike portraits, emphasizing individuality rather than idealized beauty. The sarcophagus of the spouses. This iconic terracotta sarcophagus shows a husband and wife reclining on a banquet couch, their faces animated and warm. It's a powerful testament to the Etruscans' focus on family and partnership, as well as their belief in a shared afterlife. Bronze and metalwork. Etruscan metalworkers were renowned for their expertise, crafting elaborate mirrors, jewelry, helmets, and decorative chariots. Many of these items were placed in tombs to accompany the dead. Pottery and bucero ware. Among the Etruscans' most distinctive crafts was bucero pottery, a fine black ceramic with a metallic sheen achieved through a special firing process. Unlike the brightly painted Greek pottery of the same period, bucero was often decorated with incised or relief designs, including animals, mythological figures, and geometric patterns. Bucero vessels were not just functional, they often held symbolic significance, especially in funerary contexts. Jewelry and personal adornments. The Etruscans were expert goldsmiths, using techniques such as granulation and filigree. Necklaces, bracelets, and earrings were common among the elite, often engraved with religious or protective motifs. Such jewelry wasn't merely decorative, it served as a marker of status and a means of connecting with the divine. Writing and language. The Etruscans were among the first Italic peoples to adopt a writing system. While their language remains only partially deciphered, their inscriptions offer valuable glimpses into their lives, names, and religious practices. The Etruscan alphabet. The Etruscans borrowed their alphabet from the Greeks of Euboea. They adapted it to suit their own language, which was unrelated to Latin or Greek. This alphabet later formed the basis for the Roman script, which is still used today in the Western world. Inscriptions. Thousands of Etruscan inscriptions have been found on tomb walls, pottery, mirrors, and bronze plaques. Most are short, consisting of names, dedications, or brief religious texts. One of the most important artifacts for understanding the Etruscan language is the Cippus Perusinus, a stone slab inscribed with over 40 lines of Etruscan text, believed to describe a land agreement between two families. The mystery of the language. Etruscan is a non-Indo-European language, making it difficult to interpret using known linguistic patterns. While scholars have identified many words and grammatical structures, much remains uncertain. The Romans themselves considered Etruscan writings to be mysterious and arcane, particularly their religious texts. Religion and spiritual beliefs. The Etruscans were profoundly religious, believing that the universe was governed by powerful deities who communicated their will through natural signs. To live a good life, one had to interpret these divine messages correctly. The pantheon of gods. The Etruscan pantheon was both unique and familiar, with deities that paralleled those of Greece and Rome, but retained distinct characteristics. Tenia, the chief sky god, similar to Zeus or Jupiter. Uni, a goddess of fertility, marriage, and power, akin to Hera or Juno. Menra, the goddess of wisdom and war, precursor to the Roman Minerva. Terms, a messenger god, similar to Hermes or Mercury. Nephens, a god of the sea, analogous to Poseidon or Neptune. The Etruscans also worshipped chthonic deities such as Aida and Vanth, who guided souls in the afterlife. Divination and rituals. Etruscan religion was highly ritualistic, with a strong emphasis on divination, the interpretation of signs from the gods. Haruspicy. One of their most famous practices, haruspicy involved examining the liver of a sacrificed animal for omens. Bronze models of livers, marked with sacred divisions, have been found, suggesting a complex system of interpretation. Augury. The observation of bird flight patterns was another common method of predicting the will of the gods. Sacred books. The Etruscans compiled religious knowledge into texts known as the Etrusca Disciplina, which detailed the proper rituals and interpretations of divine signs. Roman priests later studied these works. Temples and sacred spaces. Etruscan temples were different from Greek ones. Built on raised podiums, they often had a deep porch with columns and a single cella. The Temple of Portonaccio at Veii, dedicated to the goddess Minerva, is one of the best preserved examples, featuring terracotta statues of gods and mythological figures. Sacred groves, springs, and natural landscapes were also important religious sites, as the Etruscans believed that divine spirits inhabited the natural world. The afterlife. For the Etruscans, death was not an end, but a transformation. Tombs were designed as homes for the deceased, complete with furniture, tools, and items they would need in the next life. Necropolises, vast cities of the dead, such as the Banditace necropolis at Cerveteri, showcase intricate tombs carved to resemble houses with multiple rooms. Afterlife beliefs. While some tomb paintings show joyous scenes of feasting, others depict more somber journeys, with spirits being guided by Vanth or confronted by demonic figures like Charon, a grim underworld guardian. Influence on Roman religion. The Etruscan religious system had a lasting impact on Rome. Roman augurs and haruspices inherited Etruscan methods of divination, and many Roman gods were heavily influenced by Etruscan deities. Even the fasces, a bundle of rods symbolizing authority, originated as an Etruscan symbol of power. Etruscan art, writing, and religion reveal a culture deeply connected to both the material and spiritual worlds. Through vibrant frescoes, intricate metalwork, and elaborate rituals, the Etruscans sought to understand their place in the cosmos and secure their legacy. Part 4. Economy, trade, and politics. The Etruscans were not only remarkable for their cultural sophistication, but also for their thriving economy and advanced political organization. Blessed with abundant natural resources and a prime location along the Mediterranean trade routes, they became one of the most prosperous civilizations of the ancient world. Their city-states were centers of wealth, governance, and innovation, paving the way for many institutions that Rome would later inherit and adapt. A land of natural wealth, Etruria's rich environment provided the foundation for its economic success. Agriculture. The volcanic soils of central Italy were ideal for cultivating wheat, barley, grapes, and olives. These staples not only fed the population, but also produced goods for trade, such as olive oil and wine. Vineyards in Etruria were among the earliest in Italy, and Etruscan wine became a valued export throughout the Mediterranean. Cattle and pigs were also raised, providing meat, hides, and dairy products. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Etruscans practiced advanced farming techniques, including crop rotation and irrigation, to maintain soil fertility. Mining and metalworking. Etruria's hills were rich in metals, particularly iron, copper, lead, and tin. The area around Populonia was especially renowned for its iron production. Etruscan miners extracted ores, which skilled artisans then transformed into tools, weapons, and decorative objects. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was a hallmark of Etruscan craftsmanship. They produced finely wrought bronze mirrors, candelabra, helmets, and ceremonial items, many of which have survived in tombs. These goods were highly prized by neighboring cultures and formed a cornerstone of Etruscan trade. Trade networks. The Etruscans were avid traders, establishing extensive connections across the Mediterranean. Maritime trade. The Etruscans controlled key ports along the Tyrrhenian Sea, such as Pyrgi, Populonia, and Tarquinia. Their ships, influenced by Phoenician and Greek designs, were sturdy and capable of long-distance voyages. Etruscan merchants exported metal goods, wine, and agricultural products in exchange for luxury items such as ivory, amber, fine ceramics, and exotic spices. Greek pottery, particularly from Athens and Corinth, was highly sought after in Etruria, and thousands of imported amphorae have been uncovered in Etruscan tombs. Trade with Greece and the Near East. By the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, Etruscan city-states were heavily influenced by Greek traders. Greek artists and craftsmen worked in Etruria, leaving behind a legacy of artistic motifs and technologies. Meanwhile, contact with Phoenician traders introduced the Etruscans to goods from the Levant, including glassware, perfumes, and precious stones. Northern trade routes. The Etruscans also controlled overland trade routes that connected northern Italy and the Alpine regions with the Mediterranean coast. This position allowed them to act as intermediaries, trading goods such as amber from the Baltic and tin from northern Europe. Craftsmanship and industry. Etruscan artisans were renowned for their skill and innovation. Their industries included textile production. Wool and linen garments were woven on vertical looms, and dyes were used to create colorful fabrics. Pottery. In addition to their famous bucchero ware, Etruscan potters produced painted vases that imitated Greek styles, often with a distinctive local twist. Jewelry. Etruscan goldsmiths were considered among the best in the ancient world. Techniques like granulation and filigree reached extraordinary levels of refinement. These industries not only met local needs, but also generated valuable exports that enriched the city-states. The political system. The Etruscans did not form a unified nation. Instead, they were organized into a confederation of city-states, each with its own government, army, and economic base. The city-state, a typical Etruscan city-state, was an independent entity, often ruled by a king or by an oligarchic council of noble families. The king acted as both a political leader and a high priest, conducting religious ceremonies and overseeing the city's defense and trade. Major Etruscan cities included Tarquinia, known for its rich tombs and vibrant art; Veii, a powerful rival of early Rome; Cerveteri, famous for its necropolises in Port of Purgi, Volterra, and Arezzo, inland centers of trade and craftsmanship. Populonia, a hub of iron production and maritime trade. The League of 12 Cities. To maintain unity and coordinate religious matters, the Etruscans formed the League of 12 Cities. While the exact members of the League varied over time, it typically included Tarquinia, Veii, Cerveteri, Valki, and other prominent cities. The League met annually at the sanctuary of Voltemna, a sacred site near modern Orvieto, to discuss political alliances, religious ceremonies, and common defense. However, the League was not a centralized government. Each city retained its autonomy, law, and governance. Although much of their legal system is lost to history, Roman authors suggest that the Etruscans had codified laws and administrative structures. They emphasized the authority of the aristocracy, but also recognized communal assemblies, particularly in times of war or trade negotiations. The fasces, a bundle of rods with an axe, was an Etruscan symbol of magisterial power. It later became a key emblem of Roman authority, carried by lictors as a sign of the state's power to punish and protect. Military power and expansion. The Etruscans were formidable warriors who sought to expand their influence through both trade and military might. Military organization. Each city-state maintained its own army, composed of citizen soldiers and mercenaries. Etruscan warriors were equipped with bronze helmets, shields, and short swords. Their armies also used chariots, a practice adopted from Near Eastern cultures. Naval dominance. The Etruscans were skilled seafarers, and their navy played a crucial role in protecting trade routes. For a time, they dominated the Tyrrhenian Sea, competing with Greek colonists for control of maritime trade. The Greeks referred to the Tyrrhenian Sea by their name for the Etruscans. Conflicts and alliances. The Etruscans frequently clashed with Greek colonies in southern Italy and with rival Italic tribes. They also formed alliances with powerful maritime states such as Carthage, with whom they famously defeated the Greeks in the naval battle of Aquileia. Wealth and social prestige. The economic success of the Etruscans fueled a culture of luxury and display among the aristocracy. Elite families commissioned elaborate tombs, adorned with frescoes and filled with imported goods. Banquets were not only social events, but also demonstrations of wealth and power. This wealth also allowed the Etruscans to patronize art and architecture, leading to advancements in temple building, sculpture, and decorative arts that would profoundly influence Rome. The seeds of rivalry with Rome. By the 6th century BCE, Etruscan influence extended into Latium, where they played a key role in shaping early Roman culture. Several of Rome's early kings, such as Tarquinius Priscus and Tarquinius Superbus, were of Etruscan origin. Etruscan engineers helped construct Rome's first temples, city walls, and even its drainage system. However, as Rome grew in power, it began to challenge Etruscan dominance. The capture of Veii by Rome in 396 BC marked a turning point, signaling the beginning of Etruria's decline. The Etruscans' economic power and political organization made them one of the most influential civilizations in pre-Roman Italy. Through trade, craftsmanship, and military strength, they built a network of prosperous city-states that shaped the cultural landscape of the Mediterranean. Part 5. Interaction with Rome. Few relationships in ancient history are as complex and transformative as that between the Etruscans and the Romans. The Etruscans not only shaped the early foundations of Roman civilization, but also became one of Rome's greatest rivals during its rise to power. This section explores the multifaceted interaction between the two cultures, how Etruscan kings ruled Rome, the ways Etruscan art, religion, and engineering influenced Roman traditions, and the eventual conflict that led to Etruria's assimilation into the expanding Roman Republic. Rome under Etruscan influence. When Rome was still a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River, Etruscan civilization was at its peak. By the late 7th century BCE, Etruscan merchants and rulers began to exert control over the region of Latium, where Rome was located. The Tarquin kings. Roman tradition holds that the last three kings of Rome, Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus, were of Etruscan origin. Whether this is entirely accurate is debated by historians, but it is clear that Etruscan influence on Rome during this period was profound. Tarquinius Priscus. He is credited with major building projects in Rome, including the construction of the Cloaca Maxima, a massive drainage system that transformed the swampy land between the hills into the Roman Forum. Servius Tullius, known for his social and military reforms, Servius introduced the Servian Wall, an early defensive barrier around the city. Tarquinius Superbus. His reign ended in tyranny, according to Roman legend, leading to his overthrow and the founding of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE. These kings introduced advanced urban planning, religious rituals, and political structures that would leave a lasting mark on Roman society. Urban planning and architecture. Many of Rome's early architectural features were inspired or directly built by Etruscan engineers. Temples and sacred spaces. The Etruscans introduced Rome to monumental temple construction. The Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, dedicated in 509 BCE, was heavily influenced by Etruscan designs with its deep porch, high podium, and terracotta decorations. This temple became a model for later Roman religious buildings. The Cloaca Maxima. The Cloaca Maxima, an engineering marvel of its time, was designed by Etruscan builders to drain the marshy land between Rome's hills. This massive sewer not only prevented flooding, but also allowed the creation of the Forum, which became the political and social heart of the city. The arch and vault. The Etruscans were masters of the arch, which they used in city gates, bridges, and aqueducts. The Romans would later adopt and perfect this technique, using it to create enduring architectural wonders such as the Colosseum and aqueduct systems. Etruscan contributions to Roman religion. Roman religion was deeply indebted to the Etruscans. The Etruscans not only shaped the early foundations of Roman civilization, but also became one of Rome's greatest rivals during its rise to power. Divination practices. The Romans inherited haruspicy and augury directly from Etruscan priests. These practices were considered essential for making decisions in politics, warfare, and public life. The Etruscans' Etrusca Disciplina, a set of sacred texts outlining rituals and omens, heavily influenced Roman state religion. Even during the height of the Roman Republic, official augurs and haruspices, often of Etruscan descent, played vital roles in government ceremonies. Deities and sacred symbols. Several major Roman gods had Etruscan counterparts: Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, the fasces, a bundle of rods with an axe, was an Etruscan symbol of authority adopted by Roman magistrates. This emblem would later symbolize Roman power and governance. Cultural influence. Beyond religion and architecture, the Etruscans contributed significantly to Roman customs, symbols, and social traditions. Spectacles and entertainment. The Romans' love for gladiatorial combat likely originated from Etruscan funeral games. These games, which included wrestling, boxing, and sometimes staged combat, were performed to honor the dead and entertain the living. Chariot racing, another favorite Roman pastime, was also popular among the Etruscans who built early racetracks and hippodromes. Dress and symbols of power. The Roman toga is believed to have evolved from the Etruscan tabena, a semicircular cloak worn by both men and women. The ceremonial purple-bordered toga worn by Roman magistrates and priests also has Etruscan origins. Rivalry and conflict. While Etruscans helped shape Rome's early identity, their relationship with the growing city-state eventually turned hostile. The overthrow of the kings. According to Roman tradition, the tyranny of Tarquinius Superbus led to a revolt that overthrew the monarchy and established the Roman Republic in 509 BCE. This event marked the beginning of Rome's resistance to foreign rule and the decline of Etruscan influence over the city. The war with Veii. One of the most significant conflicts between Rome and the Etruscans was the war with Veii, a powerful Etruscan city located just 10 miles north of Rome. The war lasted for years and culminated in the Roman siege and capture of Veii in 396 BCE under the leadership of the Roman general Marcus Furius Camillus. The fall of Veii gave Rome control of valuable territory and marked a turning point in the balance of power between Rome and Etruria. Decline of Etruscan power by the 4th century BCE. Etruscan power had begun to wane due to several factors. Internal rivalries. The Etruscan city-states, unlike Rome, never united under a centralized government, making them vulnerable to external threats. Greek and Carthaginian pressure. Conflicts with Greek colonies in southern Italy and naval battles in the Tyrrhenian Sea weakened Etruscan trade dominance. Roman expansion. Rome's growing military strength steadily eroded Etruscan control of Latium and beyond. By the early 3rd century BCE, most of the Etruscan cities had been absorbed into the Roman Republic, either through conquest or alliance. Lasting legacy. Although the Etruscans were eventually assimilated, their influence on Rome remained profound. Roman religious rituals, urban planning, and even aspects of Roman government bore the imprint of Etruscan traditions. The Romans themselves acknowledged this debt. As historian Livy wrote, Rome's early greatness owed much to the skills and wisdom of its Etruscan kings. The Etruscans were both teachers and rivals to the Romans. Their contributions to religion, architecture, and governance helped shape Rome into the power it would become. Yet their inability to unify and resist the rising Roman Republic ultimately led to their downfall. Part 6. Decline, Assimilation, and Legacy. The Etruscans, once the dominant power of central Italy, gradually faded from history as Rome rose to supremacy. Yet their disappearance was not sudden or complete. Over centuries, their cities were absorbed, their language forgotten, but their influence endured through Roman culture. In this final part, we explore how the Etruscans declined, how their identity was woven into the fabric of Rome, and how modern archaeology has rediscovered the secrets of this mysterious people. The long decline. Etruria's decline began around the late 5th century BCE and accelerated in the following centuries. Military defeats. One of the greatest turning points was the Battle of Cumae, where the combined navies of Etruria and Carthage were defeated by the Greek fleet of Syracuse. This defeat weakened Etruscan control of the southern seas, undermining their trade dominance. Later, the prolonged conflict with Rome, particularly the fall of Veii in 396 BC, signaled the erosion of Etruscan military power. As Rome expanded, the Etruscans increasingly found themselves on the defensive, unable to unite against their aggressive neighbor. Internal disunity. The League of 12 Cities, while useful for religious gatherings, was ineffective as a military or political alliance. Each city-state pursued its own interests, often competing with or ignoring the needs of its neighbors. This lack of unity prevented a coordinated response to external threats, such as Rome, Greek colonies, or Celtic incursions. Economic shifts. As Greek and Roman trade networks expanded, Etruscan ports like Pyrgi and Populonia faced stiff competition. Control of key trade routes slipped from their grasp, and their once thriving metal industries began to decline. Rome's capture of Veii also gave it access to the fertile lands and resources that had long sustained Etruria's wealth. Roman conquest and assimilation. By the 3rd century BC, Etruria was fully integrated into the Roman Republic. However, the process of assimilation was gradual. Conquest of the city-states, Rome conquered Etruscan cities one by one. Tarquania and Cerveteri fell under Roman control during the 4th century BCE. Volsini, one of the last major Etruscan strongholds, was destroyed by Rome in 264 BCE after a rebellion. Its inhabitants were relocated, effectively erasing its independence. After these conquests, Etruscan cities were reorganized as Roman municipalities, subject to Roman law and governance. Loss of the language. By the late Republic, the Etruscan language was no longer widely spoken. Latin replaced it in public life, administration, and literature. While inscriptions and sacred texts in Etruscan survived for a time, their meaning was eventually lost. Even Roman scholars like Cicero and Varro acknowledged that they could not fully understand Etruscan writing. Cultural absorption. Many aspects of Etruscan culture were adopted or adopted by Rome. Religious practices. Roman augurs and priests preserved Etruscan methods of divination. The Etrusca Disciplina, though translated into Latin, remained a source of religious knowledge. Art and architecture. The Roman toga evolved from the Etruscan tabana, while Etruscan temple designs influenced the earliest Roman sacred buildings. Political symbols. The fasces, an Etruscan emblem of authority, became a key symbol of Roman magistrates and power. In this way, while the Etruscans as a people vanished, their traditions lived on through the Romans, who had once been their students and later their conquerors. The mystery of the Etruscans. The Etruscans have remained one of the most enigmatic ancient civilizations. Unlike the Greeks or Romans, they left behind no surviving literature to explain their worldview. What we know comes from archaeological discoveries, inscriptions, and references in Greek and Roman texts. What we don't know origins. Where did the Etruscans come from? Herodotus believed they migrated from Anatolia, while others argued for an indigenous Italic origin. Modern DNA studies suggest a complex blend of local and Eastern Mediterranean ancestry. Language. Despite thousands of inscriptions, Etruscan remains only partially deciphered. We can read names and some basic phrases, but much of their literature, philosophy, and history is lost. Religion. Although we know about their gods and rituals, the deeper spiritual beliefs of the Etruscans remain shrouded in mystery. Archaeological rediscovery. Interest in the Etruscans was revived during the Renaissance, when tombs and artifacts were unearthed in Tuscany and Lazio. Modern archaeology has continued to reveal their world. Necropolises. The Benditascia necropolis at Cerveteri and the painted tombs of Tarquinia are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. These burial complexes, with their house-like chambers and vibrant frescoes, offer unparalleled insight into Etruscan life and death. Artifacts and treasures. Etruscan gold jewelry, bronze mirrors, and ceremonial chariots are displayed in museums across the world. From the Villa Giulia in Rome to the Louvre in Paris, these objects highlight the sophistication of Etruscan craftsmanship. Recent discoveries. Recent excavations have uncovered entire Etruscan settlements, sanctuaries, and roads. Advances in DNA analysis and digital imaging are also helping scholars piece together the origins and customs of this lost civilization. The Etruscan legacy. Though absorbed by Rome, the Etruscans left an enduring imprint on Western civilization. Influence on Roman society, religion, Roman rituals, auguries, and the role of priests were directly inspired by Etruscan traditions. Urban design. The grid-like planning of Roman cities and the use of drainage systems stem from Etruscan engineering. Symbols of authority. The ceremonial regalia of Roman magistrates, including the toga, scepter, and ivory throne originated with Etruscan kings. Cultural memory. For centuries, the Romans remembered their Etruscan heritage with a mix of admiration and disdain. Writers like Livy and Tacitus described Etruscan luxury and religious piety, while also blaming their kings for tyranny. The enduring mystery. Today, the Etruscans remain a source of fascination for historians, linguists, and travelers alike. Their tombs, frescoes, and artifacts stand as silent witnesses to a culture that celebrated life, honored the dead, and left an indelible mark on history, even as their own story slipped into obscurity. The Etruscans' decline was not simply the fall of a people, but the blending of their culture into something greater. Rome's rise was built, in part, on Etruscan foundations. Through their innovations in architecture, religion, and governance, the Etruscans shaped the world that would follow. While they vanished as a distinct civilization over 2 millennia ago, the echoes of their achievements still resonate, from the Roman temples and togas that define antiquity to the very alphabet we use today. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Sweet dream.